2 days had passed since Songyu arrived in Pingzhou. Songyu sat cross-legged among the great mountains, feeling a deep sense of wonder. Such rich spiritual qi. However, having abundant spiritual qi did not necessarily speed up one's cultivation. It merely made cultivation easier and more pleasant. One would feel more comfortable and at peace. Even without cultivation, living here would be serene and joyful, contributing to longevity. Common plants and animals that lingered in such environments might also more easily attain enlightenment and transformation. Sitting here felt quite comfortable, especially with the clouds in the distance shifting slowly, clearly visible to the naked eye, and with no rush, no concern about sunset, no tasks to do, and a little cat demon picking mushrooms for you in the forest. In this peaceful scene and moment, with the sky as it was, Songyu felt like he was some deity with ample free time in the heavens. Songyu let out a sigh. He turned around and saw the little girl carrying a pouch, diligently collecting mushrooms. But it was Songyu who had asked her to collect them. She had seen Songyu picking mushrooms yesterday and noticed that he liked to eat them. Perhaps she found it amusing as well, so upon arriving here today, she volunteered enthusiastically to gather mushrooms. Taoist priest, the little girl ran back, her pouch bulging with all sorts of mushrooms, including many colorful ones. She pulled open the pouch with her small hands, showing it off. I've collected so many. That's enough. Impressive. Yeah. Songyu then instructed, just give them to me. Thank you, Lady Calico. You're welcome. Only then did the little girl generously hand the pouch over to him. Songyu took it and inspected the contents, discarding many of the mushrooms he either couldn't identify or knew were inedible, throwing them on the ground. The primary rule for eating mushrooms was to only eat the ones you knew were safe. However, as he discarded the mushrooms, he noticed something odd. A hand appeared beside him, picking up the discarded mushrooms. The person didn't say a word. Every time he threw one, she would pick it up and stash it in her pocket. When her pocket was full, she would run over, tiptoe, and quietly put them back into the bag without saying a word. Songyu looked up at her, and she looked up at Songyu. Their eyes met, one in confusion, the other in seriousness. What are you doing? What are you doing? I'm throwing it away. I'm picking it up. Such a simple question and answer session. What an honest little cat demon. Their eyes continued to meet, and strangely, Songyu could not discern any emotion from her eyes. He could only patiently explain, it's not that I don't want the mushrooms you picked, but some mushrooms are poisonous and inedible. We can only eat those that are not poisonous. Poisonous? Yes. What happens if you eat them? Some cause vomiting and diarrhea, some induce madness, while some cause hallucinations and make you see tiny people. In severe cases, they can be fatal. The little girl finally realized the seriousness of the situation, her eyes widening. She took a few steps back, putting her hands behind her back to indicate that she would no longer collect mushrooms. Songyu continued to sort through the mushrooms. One by one, he discarded them. The little girl, a few steps away, watched with wide eyes. She struggled to suppress her desire to pick them up again, feeling heartache to the point of suffocation. All those mushrooms she had collected with such effort. What a pity, what a pity. After sorting, he ended up with some golden chanterelles, cathathelasma mushrooms, Russula gallicroa mushrooms, and mountain mushrooms. Songyu took them to a nearby mountain spring to clean them, brought back half a pot of water, and set up a fire. By the time everything was set up, the little girl had already gathered most of the firewood. The horse, however, was the most leisurely, lazily grazing on the mountain grass nearby. The sky was just beginning to darken when they lit a fire and cooked soup. As the sun set in the west and night fell, the mountains cast shadows, and a mist settled between them. Only a thin line of crimson remained on the horizon, along with a small flickering flame in the mountains. By the time the soup was ready, the little girl had turned back into the Calico cat and had curled up on her discarded small garment by the fire, already asleep and looking very small. Songyu paid no attention to her and poured himself some soup. The cool mountain air made his breath visible as mist. A sip of the soup warmed his whole body. Mushrooms, unlike most vegetables, were delicious without needing meat or animal fats. He exhaled again, and it turned into white mist in the air. In the mountains, the sounds of wailing ghosts and howling demons could be heard, coming from somewhere unknown. No one knew what was happening. Songyu glanced down, and the little cat was sleeping soundly. In such a tranquil place, why worry about the mountain demons and ghosts? / ****. After some time had passed. Perhaps the temperature of the campfire had dropped, making the Calico cat feel cold. She curled up tighter, which woke her up. First, her ears stirred, then her tail. Finally, she lifted her head, searching the darkness around her. She saw the Taoist priest sitting not far away, his back turned toward her, seemingly gazing into the distance at the mountain edge, or perhaps observing the stars. Taoist priest. Him. What are you doing there? Lady Calico, you're awake. Come over here. Okay. Nestled on the layer of clothes, it was so warm that she was reluctant to leave. Nonetheless, she reluctantly got up and stretched, then slowly walked over. What's going on? Lady Calico, do you see that there's light on the horizon? The Calico cat squinted to look, her round pupils widening. It's slightly bright. Exactly. Songyu turned his head to look at her, smiling. I was wondering if there were any poisonous mushrooms left that we didn't discard, and whether we were poisoned. Are the mushrooms I picked delicious? Extremely delicious. It's really delicious. It would be even better with a bit of ham or chicken cooked in it. Next time, I will catch a couple of mice for you to stew. They'll definitely be delicious. I appreciate it. Lady Calico asked, what's that light over there? I don't know. Why is it bright? I don't know. Do you want to go over there? I do. What about you, Lady Calico? I will follow you. Then let's go. Songyu immediately stood up. The pots and pans were already cleaned and put away. There was nothing else to tidy up, so he folded up the mat he had been sitting on and gathered Lady Calico's clothes before he stuffed them into a bundle. Then, he started down the mountain path toward the light. Another half-hour passed. The Calico cat continued to walk ahead in small steps. They were nearing the mountain pass, so she quickened her pace without looking back and shouted, There's a pit here. There's a rock. There's a stick. There's. When she ran up the mountain pass and looked down, she was stunned. Her clear, soft cries suddenly ceased. Meanwhile, Songyu continued at his measured pace, walking ahead. The light came from below the mountain. As they ascended, the glowing spot gradually came into view from this commanding height. It turned out to be a bustling market. The lively market was right on the mountain's slope, occupying a wide area. It was brightly lit with numerous lanterns and a large bonfire blazing in the center. The Calico cat looked down and then up at him. Yes, Songyu nodded in response. This place was at least 100 li away from the nearest military town or city, so they didn't expect to find such a market here. Moreover, markets usually didn't operate at night or in such a desolate mountain. Let's visit, Songyu continued down the mountain. The path was only 3 kai wide. It was manageable during the day, but walking it at night required extra caution. As they were descending along the mountain path, they realized that it seemed close, yet felt far. The surroundings were pitch black and vague, with a thick mist halfway through. Passing through the fog brought a chilling, surreal sensation. The path appeared longer than expected. As they walked, an inexplicable feeling arose that it was no longer the same path seen earlier from the mountain. They weren't sure where they had ended up. The road grew wider, and the scenery changed. There were many large trees that hadn't been visible from the mountain, and numerous unexpected forks in the road. Meanwhile, the glowing area they had seen earlier drew nearer and brighter. They also began encountering people. The first person was normal, indistinguishable from regular people. The second had a pale complexion, bulging eyes, and an outstretched tongue, looking very much like a hanged ghost or a person strangled to death. The third was unusually stout with the head of a wild boar. There was also a mountain deer, walking quietly. Each carried or held lanterns of various sizes and shapes. Songyu observed them politely within the bounds of etiquette, maintaining his calm demeanor and continuing in the direction of the light. The Calico cat followed beside him, no longer running ahead, but staying so close to his feet that he almost stepped on her several times. Gradually, the number of people they encountered increased. Some were moving in the same direction, coming from different small paths and joining the main road toward the light. Others were heading in the opposite direction, coming from the light and entering various small paths. The small paths were all shrouded in the night fog of the mountains, obscuring their destinations. Each person carried a lantern of some sort, varying in design and size. Some held the lanterns in hand, some hung them around the neck, while some held them in the mouth. These lanterns emitted light, and these small points of brightness gradually converged and formed a dragon-like line of illumination through the mist-shrouded mountain paths. The lights moved back and forth, creating a rather beautiful scene. Some people noticed Songyu. At that moment, the most noticeable difference between Songyu and the others was his Taoist robe. Perhaps some demons and ghosts could smell a different scent on him, so they stared at him. The Calico cat was somewhat nervous, moving even closer to him. Songyu, however, paid no heed and continued forward. As they entered the market, it became brightly illuminated. Great Yan's nightlife was vibrant, and Yidu was the third largest city in the world. Still, such bright lights could usually only be seen during temple fairs, New Year, or the Mid-Autumn Festival. Songyu walked and observed, thinking as he watched. This market was clearly not open every day. It was likely similar to human markets, opening every few days or even just once or a few times a year like temple fairs, which explained the large number of mountain ghosts and demons. Some mountain ghosts and demons had fully transformed into human form, looking like ordinary people, either handsome or peculiar. Others retained features from their previous forms or were outright animals. Some looked somewhat disheveled or still bore their appearance from before death. There were also many strange mountain spirits that Songyu had never seen despite his many years of cultivation on Yinyang Mountain. He sometimes interacted with demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters, but never had he encountered such a wide variety of them before. The market was filled with lanterns everywhere, and the light inside was exceptionally bright. Under the bright lights, stalls were set up everywhere, and even nearby there were quaint buildings with shops open for business. Countless demons and ghosts moved among the stalls. As for the goods they traded, they were not particularly rare, mostly ordinary items. The most popular items were pots, bowls, and pans. There were also garments made from various fabrics, metal tools, wild fruits freshly gathered from the mountains in spring, freshly picked mushrooms, skewered game such as wild chicken, fish, and rabbit, vegetable and meat stalls, as well as various insects. While these differed somewhat from the goods sold at typical human markets, the essence was much the same. It was the everyday life of this remote mountain, an exotic array of essentials. Songyu, with the Calico cat and the jujubred horse, slowly strolled through the market. But wherever he went, the area would quiet down, as if a monster had entered a human market. Everyone would turn to look at him in silence, only whispering once he had moved on. Faintly, he could hear their conversations. It's a human. That cat seems to have become a demon. That horse is unusual too. How did a human end up here? Why isn't he scared? Is he another one who accidentally wandered in? Why are there so many humans accidentally wandering in here in recent years? What's going on? Maybe that cat brought him here. It broke the rules. Perhaps he's a Taoist priest. A Taoist priest. Look at his Taoist robe. Oh yeah. As soon as Songyu turned around, they immediately fell silent and hurriedly avoided his gaze, not daring to meet his eyes directly. Once he left, they resumed watching him from behind. The Calico cat lightly tugged at his pant leg. It's fine, Songyu spoke gently to her and continued forward. This was truly a sight to behold. Chapter 74, The Diversity of Beings. Songyu walked slowly, observing carefully. He could feel the varied reactions of these demons and spirits toward him, the unexpected visitor. Some were indifferent, some cautious, some curious, some hostile, and even some fearful. Thus, he kept silent and continued to observe. These demons and ghosts used human copper coins, but they used coins from all dynasties. Coins from any era were accepted. He didn't see any silver coins being used. The prices of goods were quite different from those in the towns below the mountain. Cooking pots, pans, and various ironware were sold at high prices and were very popular. Clothing and fabric were also noticeably more expensive than in the towns below, while meat prices were slightly lower. Some mountain delicacies, which seemed rare and exotic to the people from the towns below, appeared quite ordinary here and were both plentiful and cheap. There were also some rare items not commonly seen elsewhere, with varying prices. Surprisingly, there were even books for sale. In addition to works by famous authors and Taoist and Buddhist scriptures, there were also collections of strange tales written by humans. An idea began to form in Songyu's mind. If a merchant came here and engaged in trade, it would surely be very profitable. It could even be likened to a small silk road. Songyu silently chuckled to himself and approached the first stall. It was a stall selling whole hams. When sliced open, the hams were already very attractive in color, and they appeared even more tempting and red under the candlelight. This could be due to either exceptional skills of the butcher or high-quality meat. The stall owner was a tall man with the head of a leopard. Greetings, sir. Songyu approached the stall, lowered his head to look at the goods, and asked politely, How much is the ham? Do you accept coins from the Great Yan dynasty? Chop. The knife used for slicing the meat was stuck into the chopping board. The leopard-headed stall owner fixed his round eyes on Songyu. His pupils looked like tiny dots. After sniffing a few times, he stared at him for a while before speaking. Are you a human? Indeed. How did you get in here? I am traveling the world, and I was passing through this mountain. Before sleeping, I saw lights in this mountain here and followed the light and the path, which led me in. You should leave. Of course, I intend to leave. Song Yu smiled and bowed again, but since I'm already here, it would be a pity not to take a look around and explore before I leave. Hurry up and leave. I see the ham you're selling is of excellent quality. Tonight, I coincidentally picked some mushrooms from the mountains to make soup. While I was drinking the soup, I was thinking it would be perfect with some good ham or an old hen. Song Yu shook his head and smiled. Then, I met you by coincidence. It seems that fate has brought us together. I'm not selling to humans. Why? This is not a place for humans. There are plenty of demons and ghosts in the towns below. Song Yu paused. It's actually quite rare to encounter a stall owner like yourself here, so it's even more precious. Do you really want to buy ham? I'm just asking. 100 wen per tael. Unknowingly, a circle of mountain demons and spirits had gathered around, watching the interaction as if it were a spectacle. Song Yu continued to look closely at the ham. Is this wild boar meat? Do you think wild boar meat is that common? It's a boar raised by me. The stall owner glared at him coldly. It's well raised. How many taels do you want? I'm just puzzled. Song Yu shook his head, looked up, and met the gaze of the stall owner with a leopard head. Why do you sell to others for 100 wen per catty, but to me, it's 100 wen per tael? The stall owner stared at him intently, even moving a bit closer. But seeing no hint of fear on Song Yu's face, he seemed at a loss. Finally, he said, if you don't want to buy, go buy from elsewhere. Perhaps the stalls of those dead ghosts will sell to you. Why? Just because I'm human. So what if it is? Song Yu was even more puzzled. In this place, there were all kinds of demons, ghosts, and spirits. Even those that were natural enemies before they became ghosts and demons all managed to live in harmony. Why then was he being ostracized? I haven't looked down upon you because you're a demon, so why do you give me an attitude because I'm human? Don't you know, humans are not welcome here. Why? Why ask so many questions? The stall owner was getting irritated. Don't humans also reject demons and ghosts? Do I look like someone who rejects demons? At this question, the stall owner was momentarily stunned. The stall owner once again sized up the Taoist priest from top to bottom. Seeing that he was calm and composed in this world of demons and spirits, and that he appeared quite natural without any sign of fear or disgust, his gaze shifted to the Taoist priest's feet. There, a calico cat was standing on its hind legs like a human, leaning against the Taoist priest's leg, its head raised and peeking at the stall owner. One of its paws was also tugging at the Taoist priest's trouser leg. The stall owner pondered for a while before snorting coldly. Humans are cunning and deceitful, cruel and ruthless. Look at all the mountain spirits and demons behind you. Except for a few wild ghosts, how many of them actually like humans? You're mistaken. Song Yu disagreed with him. In human tales, demons, ghosts, monsters, and spirits are often depicted as malevolent and harmful, often being involved in harming and killing people. But most does not mean all, and those harmful beings do not represent all demons, ghosts, spirits, and monsters. Just as I came here without prejudice against you, why should you hold prejudice against me? You. Please calm down, Song Yu quickly advised. Now that you've become a demon, it's important to be more patient. Being too irritable is not beneficial for your cultivation. Must you buy my ham? It's not that I must buy it, but I find it appealing and am considering buying it, so I came over to ask, Song Yu replied amiably. Initially, whether I buy or not does not matter. However, your attitude toward me is puzzling, so I felt the need to discuss it with you. If I've caused any offense, please bear with me. You. Before the stall owner could finish, the crowd of onlookers beside suddenly parted to make way for two figures, who squeezed over. Both Song Yu and the stall owner looked over. The two figures were human-shaped. One was completely human-shaped but extremely burly. His clothes looked strained, as if they could hardly contain his size. The other was similarly large but even taller, with the head of a water buffalo and curved horns. It was worth noting that both were wearing the same type of clothing, resembling official uniforms, though different in color and style from those of the great Yan officials. Perhaps it was a uniform from some past dynasty. This town even had officials. Song Yu was somewhat surprised. Most human towns below the mountain had no officials, being self-organized by the common people. Although there were officials patrolling during temple fairs, they were mainly due to the urban setting. However, considering that this place was full of demons, spirits, demons and monsters of various kinds with their own unique situations different from humans, Song Yu understood. The two figures quickly made their way out of the crowd. When officials handled matters, they must do so authoritatively. The two demons arrived with a fierce demeanor, but upon seeing Song Yu in his Taoist robe and his calico cat, hesitated slightly. They realized that this intruder was not an ordinary human, unlike those who usually ventured in. Their expressions softened somewhat, though they still maintained a commanding presence. "Where are you from? Where are you going? Why are you here? Speak quickly." "I am Song Yu, a mountain dweller from Yizhu in Linquan County. I'm a wanderer traveling the world. I happened upon this market while passing through the mountain and followed the lights behind the mountains here. I apologize if I have been impolite." "You are a Taoist cultivator." "Yes." "Which Taoist temple?" "Hidden Dragon Temple of Yin Yang Mountain." Upon hearing this, the crowd didn't react much, nor did the buffalo-headed official. However, the burly one's expression hardened. The buffalo-headed official asked, "What are you doing here, causing a commotion?" "It was not my intention," Song Yu said with a bow. "I only wanted to buy some ham. Perhaps seeing a living human is a rare sight here, which is why everyone gathered around." "Ah, I see." The buffalo-headed official nodded. "This is a marketplace run by mountain demons, spirits, and monsters. It is held once every season. It's already uncommon for a human to come here safely. Since you did not intend to intrude, we usually won't hold you accountable. As you are a Taoist cultivator, you should leave on your own." "Since I've entered this place, it must be fate. I find this place quite intriguing and would like to explore further. May I trouble you for some assistance?" The buffalo-headed official's eyes widened. At that moment, he felt a tap on his shoulder from his colleague beside, who then stepped forward alone. Though puzzled, the buffalo-headed official kept his mouth shut. "Since you are a Taoist cultivator, you should understand the principle that all beings are different. This place is not suitable for humans. It would be better if you followed me. I can lead you out." "Why is this place not suitable for humans?" Song Yu asked, puzzled. "Please explain." "Though this place is in the mortal realm, it is a gathering spot for demons and ghosts. Aside from us, many fierce and mindless evil creatures lurk outside. It's difficult for ordinary people to find or reach this place. Moreover, staying here too long can cause one to lose their sanity and be unable to leave." The officer, who was as sturdy as a bear, paused before continuing. "Naturally, with your great power, you aren't afraid of these things. But we are just crude and wild demons and spirits from the mountains. Why would someone like you want to linger here with us?" "You are mistaken. All beings are creatures of heaven and earth. What difference is there between humans and demons?" Song Yu paused. "From what I see, everyone here engages in trade harmoniously, treating each other with respect. The two of you are also kind-hearted, reasoning with others rather than resorting to force. Where does this talk of being crude and wild come from?" The official was silent for a moment before ceasing to persuade him. He merely cupped his hands and bowed to Song Yu. "Please do as you wish. However, the market only opens at night, and you must leave before dawn, or you might have trouble finding your way back. Even with your high cultivation, it might still be quite troublesome for you." After saying this, he looked around and added after a moment of pondering, "It is a rare occasion that we get to meet this human. The immortal master has not shown any disrespect, so we should all treat him with courtesy. Let's not be too crude." "Thank you." "No need to thank me, Sai. Everyone disperse, disperse. Don't block the way like this. Hurry up, it's almost midnight." As he spoke, he let out a roar, a sound like that of a bear. The onlookers were dispersed with a wave of his hand. How he acted was just like the officials in the towns below. Song Yu cupped his hands, then bowed to him, and to the surrounding demons and spirits before turning back to the leopard-headed stall owner. "Can you sell to me now?" The stall owner squinted his eyes and swiftly pulled out a knife from the stall, his motion as quick as lightning. Swish. A thin slice of ham, almost translucent, was placed on the knife blade and handed to Song Yu. "Try it." "Thank you." Song Yu carefully picked it up. The stall owner's knife skills were impressive, cutting the ham so thin that it had a paper-like texture. High-quality ham tasted great even raw. Song Yu didn't know how good this ham was, but he found the taste just right. It tasted lightly salted when placed in the mouth, savory but not greasy, with a tender and chewy texture that became more flavorful the more it was chewed. He already found it a delicacy, but after swallowing, the rich aroma surged back and left him wanting more. How could a demon have such culinary skills? 8 wen per tael, 120 wen per catty. If you buy a whole piece, I can offer a discount." The leopard-headed stall owner, noticing Song Yu's enjoyment, squinted his eyes with some pride. "Earlier it was 100 wen per catty. Why is it more expensive for me?" The other customer already negotiated the price beforehand. "Then please sell it to me for 100 wen per catty." "How much do you want?" "About 2 catties, sliced thinly." "All right." The stall owner's small knife was exceptionally sharp and expertly used. He sliced through the ham with swift, clean cuts, each stroke producing a thin, paper-like slice that gently landed on the table. The soft hissing sound of the blade, as precise as his technique, was a pleasure to both watch and hear. Songyu glanced at the table, which wasn't very clean. Perhaps they didn't mind that. Chapter 75. Casual Conversation with a Ghost. Songyu tore the slice of ham into small pieces and placed it in his mouth. He didn't rush to chew. Instead, he let it linger in his mouth and savored the salty, aromatic flavor it released. Once it softened a bit, he began to chew, appreciating the texture of the meat fibers. The ham was dry and fragrant, and he didn't grow tired of it no matter how much he ate. He slowed his pace and tore off another piece. Then he bent down and lowered his hand to allow the calico cat to stand on its hind legs and take the meat from his hand. The demons, ghosts, monsters, and spirits passing by watched them, but no longer caused trouble or gathered around. As he strolled, he eventually reached the large bonfire in the center of the marketplace. The market was clustered around the fire. This fire was unusual, possessing some strange properties, though it wasn't a divine or infernal fire capable of burning the heavens or scorching one's soul. Instead, it guided the mountain demons and spirits and kept away other malevolent beings. Near the fire, Songyu saw several demons and spirits dressed in official uniforms. Even the ghosts showed no fear of the fire. When the distant bear-like and buffalo-headed officials saw Songyu, they cupped their hands. Songyu returned the gesture. The existence of this marketplace was quite extraordinary. Since there had been previous intruders, it was possible that there were legends about it in the towns below. Perhaps even the temple owner of Hidden Dragon Temple had visited here in the past. It seemed that the bear-like official had informed the buffalo-headed one about this. He decided not to approach them any closer. It would make both them and himself uncomfortable. Instead, he chose a different direction and continued exploring. Purchased a variety of wild fruits from a monkey merchant, high-quality half-dried fodder from a horse merchant, and a small fish from an unfamiliar mountain spirit. The most significant find was the mushrooms from a fox's stall, matsutake, Macrolepiota albuminosa, the lurid bolete, and other varieties, all at the same price as the fodder from the horse merchant. He also bought some rare and intriguing items that were hard to find outside, spending quite a bit of money. Overall, the trip was quite rewarding. However, the greatest gain was not the purchased items or bargains, but the journey itself. Here, the demons and spirits were countless. Likely all the mountain's demons, ghosts, monsters, and spirits from several hundred li had gathered. There was a wide variety: cats, mice, wolves, deer, cattle, horses, and rabbits. There were also spirits born from plants, as well as many mountain and water spirits naturally formed by the earth, and ghosts who died on this road but never dispersed. These non-human beings from various dynasties and eras all coexisted harmoniously here, even establishing their own order. This broadened his horizons and expanded his understanding. There were beings from all ages and eras, all living harmoniously and even having their own order, which broadened his horizons and adjusted his perceptions. If an ordinary literate person were to accidentally stumble into this place and leave safely, they might even leave behind a legendary tale of this extraordinary encounter. As he walked, he noticed a small ghost beside him watching him. Songyu turned his head to look and saw a round-faced boy, about 8 or 9 years old. He looked quite well behaved. The boy was walking in the same direction, frequently glancing at him. The boy's eyes held a hint of spirituality. Songyu smiled and nodded, and the small ghost responded with a grin. After a few more steps, the small ghost moved a bit closer and curiously asked, "Are you a divine immortal?" "I'm just an ordinary human." "How brave." "Haha. I didn't hear clearly before. How did you get in here?" "It's quite a coincidence," Songyu answered casually, his voice gentle. "I had dinner, sat down to watch the stars, and saw the lights from below this mountain, so I followed them and came in here." "Such a coincidence." "Indeed. Earlier, the bear official wanted to take you out. Why didn't you leave?" "It's a rare encounter, so I wanted to explore a bit more." "There are so many ghosts here. Aren't you afraid of all the ghosts here?" "What's there to be afraid of about ghosts?" Songyu maintained his courtesy with the little ghost. "There's a saying in the human world, perhaps we ourselves are the reincarnations of ancient spirits. Generally speaking, when people died and became ghosts, they typically wouldn't continue to grow unless some lucky chance occurred even if they were children. So, although this ghost appeared as a child, it might have existed for a longer time in this world than Songyu or even his master. It was not appropriate to view him merely as a child. Their experience and knowledge might grow, but their mental development could be different without a physical body, so they shouldn't be treated as adults or elderly. Perhaps we ourselves are the reincarnations of ancient spirits." The small ghost repeated the saying, finding it interesting. He smiled and asked, "Is there really such a thing as reincarnation in this world?" It was just a poetic expression. "So is reincarnation real?" "I haven't seen it myself." "I knew it." The small ghost tapped his left hand with his right, making a sound that was light despite the apparent force. Songyu smiled and asked, "How many times have you been here?" "A lot, too many to count." The small ghost grinned. "But it's quite boring here. It's all things for mountain demons and spirits, not much for ghosts." "Have humans come here before?" "Occasionally. There have been more in the recent 2 years." "Do you know who built this place? Or was it built voluntarily by everyone?" "It was voluntarily built, but there was also protection from the mountain god." The small ghost paused. "I heard it's been around for many years. It started with nearby mountain demons and spirits exchanging things, but it wasn't as large in scale or fixed in this place. It seems that about a few hundred years ago, a mountain god emerged here and called everyone over, so they came." A mountain god, Songyu thought for a moment. Was likely not a mountain god appointed by the court or heavenly palace, as such mountain gods typically wouldn't be so friendly to demons and ghosts. In comparison, it was more likely that the mountain itself nurtured a spirit, which the local demons and creatures revered as the mountain god. Moreover, the fact that this mountain god could carve out such a space within the mountains, connected to the mortal world yet distant from it, truly showed his remarkable skill. Only a spirit nurtured by this vast mountain could possibly have the power to arrange such a setup relying on the mountain itself. "Indeed," the little ghost thought for a moment, "but I've heard that the mountain god has a bad temper. There were people who came here before, and the mountain god wasn't pleased. He got into a fight with them, and they were badly beaten. After that, the mountain god stopped showing up. Now we just come here on our own and select some more powerful spirits to keep things in order, to avoid any conflicts." "So that's how it is," Songyu nodded. "That person really was disrespectful." "Exactly. Since fate brought us together, allow me to offer you some incense." "How could I accept that?" "I simply wish to have a chat with you." "If you insist." Songyu spotted a stall selling incense, where the shopkeeper was a rat. It was a rare sight in this market, as it specialized in goods for ghosts. As a result, many wild ghosts gathered around. Songyu entered the stall. There were tables and stools, though all were quite short and small. The tables were just over 1 kai high, and the stools even shorter. Then, the man and the ghost exchanged formalities and sat across from each other. The Calico cat also jumped onto a stool. "What would you like, sir?" 3 sticks of grass incense." Songyu noticed that others were all lighting 3 sticks of grass incense. "Would you like them lit?" "Yes, please." "Certainly." Suddenly, a living person walked in. The wild ghosts who were enjoying the incense, as well as the mountain spirits and demons accompanying them, kept glancing over at Songyu. Their chatter quieted. Meanwhile, the Calico cat fixed its gaze on the shopkeeper, making him rather terrified. "That's impolite." Songyu gently turned the cat's head back and ignored the stares, focusing on his conversation with the little ghost. The little ghost was quite talkative, speaking as he ate. He had great cultivation skills, allowing him to eat the incense ash, while ordinary wild ghosts could only consume the smoke. However, this type of incense wasn't infused with any power of prayer, offering little benefit to one's cultivation, and certainly not helping wild ghosts ascend to the divine Tao. Its primary use was to satisfy hunger. When the market wasn't open, these ghosts mostly survived on mountain dew in the morning and twilight mist at night, as they couldn't obtain these incense, leading a rather austere life. The little ghost complained that although there were all kinds of spirits and demons in the market, ghosts were treated the worst and looked down upon. They had the lowest status and could buy the fewest things. Moreover, the currency here was copper coins, which were particularly unfriendly to ghosts. The worst part was that they were hard to handle. The more widely circulated the coins, the heavier they became, sometimes weighing as much as 1,000 caddies, which made them impossible for a ghost without sufficient cultivation skilled to lift. Thus, most of the ghosts who came to the market either sought out and exchanged coins that hadn't been touched in years, or they arranged to come with other mountain spirits and ask these friends to help carry the money. Some clever ghosts even befriended animals with spirituality to have them transport the money. Songyu found all this exceptionally interesting. The little ghost also mentioned with a smile that many people below the mountain often exaggerated and distorted the image of spirits and demons, portraying them as terrifying, ugly, and irrational beings. They would depict female spirits who couldn't control themselves the moment they came across impoverished scholars. These stories were often treated as jokes, causing much laughter. Sometimes the little ghost would ask about the world below, what dynasty it was, whether certain towns or villages still existed. Songyu answered when he knew and apologized when he didn't. Halfway through their idle chat, The incense was also halfway burned. The little ghost sighed. It's rare to meet a Taoist priest like you who dares to speak with a ghost. I also haven't talked to a human in a long time. He paused before continuing. But when the bear official wanted to take you out, you really should have gone with him. Song Yu, for the fourth time, gently redirected the calico cat's gaze and head from the shopkeeper and asked, "Why is that?" "Firstly, this place isn't suitable for you to stay too long. If you linger, you might not be able to leave. Secondly, there are many ways out of here, but you may not find your way back to where you came from. By the time the sun rises, you could find yourself deep in the mountains, with the paths in front and behind you vanishing. Thirdly, away from this bonfire, there are many evil creatures, even we must tread carefully. Many mortals who inadvertently stumble here are eaten before they can reach this place. It was sheer luck that you didn't encounter any on your way here. If you run into them on your way back, you'll have a tough time." "Evil creatures, what are they?" "It's hard to say. There are many kinds. Most are naturally formed evil creatures or vengeful ghosts, though brutish spirits and man-eating mountain demons are rare." "I see." Song Yu's curiosity was piqued again. "So how can I encounter them?" "Stick to the main roads, preferably retrace your steps. Don't wander aimlessly, and if you find spirits or demons going in the same direction, try to travel with them. The more companions, the better." The little ghost hesitated, feeling something was amiss, but couldn't quite pinpoint what it was even after closer reflection. "Thank you. Since you treated me to incense, let me give you something in return." The little ghost finished the last bit of incense ash, stood up, and patted his back. "Over there, they're selling lanterns. I'll take you to buy one, and then we'll get some fire from the bonfire. The lantern will shine brighter than usual, lasting until dawn, and it'll scare away the evil creatures along the way. Haha, I shouldn't say that. It's inauspicious. Let's just say you won't encounter any. But even if you don't, the mountain paths are pitch black outside the market, so it's good to have a lantern for light." "How can I accept that?" "Don't refuse." "Thank you." For the fifth time, Song Yu turned the calico cat's head away from the shopkeeper and patted her with a smile before he followed the little ghost outside. Although the little ghost looked young, his speech was refined, not like that of an ordinary person. When Song Yu offered to treat him to some incense, he must have already planned to give something in return when he accepted his offer. So Song Yu only politely declined once. They indeed went to buy a lantern, and the little ghost took out some money to pay for it, which cost more than the 3 sticks of grass incense. Hande par 98 thoughts. Okay, now I'm craving for some good ham oo. Chapter 76, An Unremarkable Way of Reformation. "Please lend me a fire to ward off evil and extend the day." The little ghost, holding an unlit lantern, stood respectfully in front of the fire as he spoke and bowed. Silently, the lantern lit up. Song Yu also found this quite wonderful as he watched. "Thank you, mountain god." The little ghost bowed again, then turned to Song Yu and smiled. "It's done. Please follow me, I'll send you out of the market." "All right." Song Yu followed him, chatting as they walked. "Are you from the previous dynasty?" "How did you know, Taoist master?" "The way you address people is different." "What do you mean?" "Since the Great Yan dynasty was established, common people prefer to call Taoist priests and Taoists among the people Mr. "I see. Then I'll call you Mr. too." "Whatever you prefer is fine." "Then I'll go with Taoist master." Little Ghost walked ahead with the lantern, casting a patch of firelight on the ground that resembled the color of dusk. "I am indeed from the previous dynasty, but I was born during its final years. At that time, the world was in chaos. Demons and ghosts frequently appeared. My parents and I were eaten by a fierce tiger while traveling through these mountains, turning me into a ghost of a devoured victim. However, spring came quickly, and with Jingzh, thunder struck. The fierce tiger, having eaten people and accumulated evil qi, was taken by heaven. As I have never harmed anyone, I escaped this calamity. Later, I regained my freedom and gradually settled in these mountains. I unexpectedly found that there was another world hidden within these great mountains. This is the world of demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters. Yes, in this world, it's rare for us demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters to have such a place." Sigh, Song Yu only sighed. This was a world where humanity prevailed, undoubtedly encroaching upon the space for demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters. But being human himself, how could he say anything? "Taoist master, you don't need to feel that way. Though I am a ghost, I was once human too." The little ghost smiled. He added, "Being a wild ghost in these mountains also isn't bad. Although in recent years, Taoists often come to these mountains to catch ghosts, they usually don't trouble those of us who behave ourselves. There are countless demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters in these great mountains. It's a harsh life, but not so boring. It might even be more enjoyable than the human world. This trip has really opened my eyes." "Don't be surprised. We may be spirits, ghosts, and monsters, but once we gain enlightenment, we have our own lives too. Indeed, while talking, they had already reached the edge of the market. The little ghost stopped and raised the lantern with a smile, asking, "Taoist master, do you still remember the way back?" Xianxia took the lantern from his hand. "Vaguely. Be sure to be careful along the way. Meeting you was really the greatest fortune of this night. And for me as well. Since they met by fate and talked freely, it was only natural to part when the time came, without really needing many words. They bowed to each other, cherishing this fated encounter, bid each other farewell, and went their separate ways. The little ghost returned to the market, and Xianxia walked into the night. The lantern illuminated a small area, clearly revealing the cracks in the dry dirt road and the weeds. People vaguely approached from behind on the roadside and walked into the mist ahead. Meanwhile, others emerged from the mist ahead with surprised or puzzled eyes as they brushed past Xianxia on their way to the market. Xianxia patted his horse's neck. "Do you still remember the way back?" The horse didn't speak, only silently lifted its hooves and moved forward. Xianxia smiled. "Thanks to you." The Calico cat followed them with small, quick steps. She looked up at him, then at the demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters passing by. She kept moving forward, but her eyes and head turned to follow them. "You were staring at that incense seller earlier. It was really rude," Xianxia said as they walked. "It has gained enlightenment and is no longer an ordinary animal after becoming a demon. You shouldn't have stared at it like that. You might have frightened it." That was a mouse. Every living thing in this world, whether demons, ghosts, spirits, or monsters, once they gain enlightenment, are like humans. If you eat them, it's like eating humans. You'll accumulate evil qi, which is against heaven's law. "I was just looking." "Very rude." The little cat fell silent, seemingly pondering this, and thus slowed down somewhat, falling slightly behind. After figuring it out, she quickly trotted to catch up, shaking her head at the same time. "Bleh, bleh, bleh," she recited, mimicking the tone of his "very rude." The journey outward was also wondrous. This truly was the world of demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters. Besides the market set up in the center by those with cultivation skills and followed rules, the road was also filled with countless less intelligent little creatures with inadequate cultivation skills. Xianxia saw a kind of small spirit which stood upright on all fours. It looked human but different, only as tall as a palm. It carried a tiny palm-sized house on its back, struggling along the road, neither coming from nor going to the market, just walking along the road. In the boundless thick fog, its destination and purpose were unknown. He also saw a tiny person walking on the tree trunk holding an umbrella. She looked like a delicate woman, and her umbrella was also a floral one. However, she was walking upside down on the tree trunk, with her head facing down and her feet facing up, stepping along the lower edge of the trunk. No one knew why she didn't fall nor why she carried an umbrella that wouldn't shield her from rain, but might even accumulate rainwater when it rained. There were also people who shouted as they walked along. These people were also very small, even slightly smaller than a palm. They stood upright on all fours, resembling human figures, yet different from humans. They were almost naked, with only 2 or 3 strips of cloth, which could be said to be modesty coverings. However, these cloth strips did not cover their private parts, but were instead wrapped around other areas. Xianxia could not understand what they were saying, but their voices were shrill and tone-vehement. However, there was nothing in front of them, and they seemed to be talking to the air. Interestingly, they only spoke like this when unseen. Once noticed, they fell silent immediately. First, Xianxia thought they were talking to him, and he repeatedly looked at them several times. These little beings would then alternately chatter and quiet down several times. Xianxia found it amusing and puzzling, but later he realized that they did this whenever other demons, ghosts, monsters, and spirits passed by too. He realized this was probably just their nature. "Taoist priest, I think I've been poisoned eating mushrooms." "You didn't eat any at all." "Oh, right." Gradually, they moved farther and farther away from the market. The number of pedestrians on the roadside dwindled gradually. Thick fog surrounded them both ahead and behind. The mountain path gradually grew darker, illuminated only by the tiny glow of his lantern as they walked slowly through the mountains. It was still vaguely recognizable as the same path they had been on before. At some point, apart from himself, other lights were no longer visible in his field of vision. Occasionally, he could vaguely make out a faint glimmer, but it was almost indiscernible through the fog. Meanwhile, evil creatures from the periphery began to follow them. "Taoist priest," the Calico cat whispered a warning. "It's all right," Xianxia continued walking ahead, holding his lantern. In the dark night and mountain fog, the appearances of the evil creatures were unclear. Intimidated by the lantern's light, they did not dare to come too close. Only their shadows could vaguely be seen hidden in the darkness. He could hear their panting or faint, indistinct and incomprehensible sounds that they emitted. Thus, he could sense their presence. But it seemed that a living person attracted them far more than the demons, ghosts, monsters, and spirits that frequented these mountains. Gradually, their numbers actually increased. Just like humans, they became bolder as they gathered. Thus, they started to come closer and closer to the light. There are more and more of them, the Calico cat whispered to Xianxia. Her body had quietly tensed up, fur bristling, as she considered whether spitting fire might scare them away. Gradually, their figures began to appear on the outskirts of the firelight, becoming clear in the dim glow. Indeed, they were diverse and bizarre in appearance. Some were evil creatures born from various coincidences between heaven and earth. Some were vengeful ghosts. Some had physical forms, while others were illusory figures. Some were humanoid, others twisted in shape. Some were beautiful, others ugly. Some retained only the predatory instincts of fierce beasts, while others had twisted intelligence and could understand human speech. Some were familiar, while others were not. Some could even be used as medicinal ingredients, either entirely or partially, and the resulting medicine had miraculous effects, such as ensuring honesty or boosting courage. Some could even be directly cooked and eaten after being caught, with unusual effects. The preceding market had sold items related to them. They were either objects transformed from their deceased forms or parts of their bodies. It gave the impression that anything could be cooked and eaten or used as medicine. The premise was that one must be able to catch them, know how to prepare them as medicines, and dare to consume them. However, do not associate them with demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters. Even demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters disliked or even feared them. In the eyes of demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters, their image was not much different from how humans perceived them. To them, demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters were not much different from humans. The biggest difference was that most demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters had some cultivation skills and were difficult to deal with. Faced with this scene, even many demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters from the market with deep cultivation skills would be startled, either turning back with their lanterns or thinking of other ways to escape. Xianxia, however, was unafraid, observing as he walked. Gradually, they were surrounded by them in layers, 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. Even the jianghu-bred horse also began to feel uneasy, repeatedly turning to look at Xianxia. Only after Xianxia smiled and reassured it did it feel more at ease and continued forward. These evil spirits were undoubtedly afraid of the lantern. They stopped when it stopped, greedily staring from beyond its light. If the lantern moved a step forward, those behind surged forward a step too, while those in front scrambled to retreat a step, some falling and rolling away on the ground in their haste. The bolder, less intelligent ones started repeatedly eyeing the shadows beside the jianghu-bred horse, thinking of leaping into them. "Huh," Xianxia chuckled twice, suddenly asking curiously, "Do you all want to eat us?" There was no immediate response. The evil spirits only stared at them, their eyes full of greed that answered the question. Xianxia, dissatisfied with the silent response, shook his head with a smile and raised the lantern in his hand. "If you all answer me, I'll extinguish it." Some of the evil spirits that could understand exchanged glances, then they widened their eyes. Strange voices echoed one after another. "Yes. Yes. Yes." Xianxia shook his head again, amused. "You're all really foolish. This lantern can't burn you, so why fear it?" But he kept his promise. He simply stopped walking, lifted the lantern, and blew at it. Whoosh! The lantern's light went out instantly. The only light in the mountains vanished, leaving a deathly still, oppressive, and suffocating darkness. In the darkness, the group of evil spirits immediately surged forward like a tidal wave breaking through a dam. They rushed eagerly, one after another, excitedly swarming toward the human, horse, and cat in the center, pushing and shouting. Boom! Suddenly, a light shone again in the mountains. This light wasn't white, green, blue, or purple, but a bright yellowish-red flame. The firelight didn't come from the front or the back, nor from the left or the right. It lit up from every direction around them, from above and below, from all directions, illuminating half the mountain in an instant. Along with the firelight came a fire that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Any evil spirit was reduced to nothingness. The firelight extinguished, and darkness returned to the mountains. The mountain wind blew, and the sound was pure and untainted. Xianxia stood still holding his lantern. He raised it, tilted his head, and blew at it again. Immediately, the lantern's light rekindled, just as before. However, after taking a step, he stopped and thought for a moment. He shook his head and then extinguished the lantern again. He carefully put it away, hung it on the horse's back, and proceeded slowly by the light of the stars. The horse knew the way and led him back along the same path. Without his noticing it, the road had turned back into a mountain path. When he looked back and saw the same mountain scenery and lights as at the beginning, it meant they had already walked out. Songyu did not return to his original resting place, but found another flat spot at the same place. He spread out his felt blanket again and sat down cross-legged. He covered his legs with another blanket and stared at the distant lights in a trance. Those evil spirits did not stay in his mind. Only the rare sights on the road and the experiences in the market were worth pondering over. This was undoubtedly a wonderful journey. Cultivating on Yin-Yang Mountain, no matter how deep his cultivation skills were, how could he witness such wondrous things? The most wonderful part was unexpectedly the encounter with the little ghost. This encounter was pure and simple. Songyu had read many ancient texts describing such encounters, but he never found them intriguing. Now that he had personally encountered it, he realized that this fateful encounter, which was pure like water, was truly memorable. He thought he would find it hard to forget these short 2 or 4 hours of conversation, even decades later. Taoist priest. What are you doing? The calico cat crawled over, approaching him with a face full of curiosity. I'm not dead. Then what are you doing? Just daydreaming. Oh? Do you know what daydreaming is, Lady Calico? I often daydream. Then you must be well versed in the fundamentals. Why was your fire so powerful? Why was your fire so powerful? The calico cat sat down properly in front of him, looked up, and stared at him, light flickering continuously in her eyes. Maybe you can do it too someday. How can I do it? You are a diligent cat. How can I do it? You must know that to become powerful at magic, it is inseparable from one's cultivation skills, mastery of this field of magic, even the timing and location, and one's mental state. I don't understand. The most important of these are your own cultivation skills, Songyu said softly, looking down at the calico cat at his side and meeting her gaze. Lady Calico, you're very good at gathering firewood to make a fire, aren't you? Letter 1d640, letter 1d4b6 small cap n, letter 1ecd beta e circumflex. Yes. Songyu continued. Think of it like gathering firewood for a fire. The deeper your cultivation skills, the more firewood you can put on the fire, and the better the firewood will burn. If your cultivation skills are shallow, there won't be enough firewood, and it won't be good firewood either. To make a big fire, you will need a lot of good firewood. To have a lot of good firewood, you need to cultivate spiritual methods and improve your cultivation skills. Oh. And then there's your mastery of this field of magic. It's like how you arrange the firewood and start the fire, Songyu continued. With the same amount and type of firewood, some fires burn quickly and some slowly. Some produce large flames, while others have smaller ones. Some fires burn cleanly, while others, although appearing burnt out, actually reveal a significant amount of unburned material left inside when poked. If you want the fire to burn well, you must practice magic diligently. Oh. Timing and location are self-explanatory. It's hard to make a fire on a rainy day outside. You are very smart and surely know this. I do know. And then there's the mental state and belief. The mental state is the most mysterious and hardest to cultivate, yet also sometimes the easiest. It's different for everyone and really hard to say. However, belief is simple, Songyu explained. 5-element spells aren't as affected by belief as earth-traversing technique, but there is still an influence. If 2 people have the same level of cultivation skills and mastery of this field of magic, and they compete at the same time and place, the one with ample confidence will surely win over the one who is lacking in confidence. Is that all? If we're just talking about technique, that's all. However, to reach a high level, you still need to have your own understanding of different ways, Songyu smiled. That's even harder to explain and requires dedicated contemplation. You don't need to care about it for now, just let things take their natural course. Oh, the calico cat pondered for a moment, then looked up at him again. So, how can I do it? Cultivate diligently and practice a great deal. I have always been doing that. You have perseverance and determination. I am ashamed that I am not as good as you in that respect, Songyu said with shame. Then how much longer will it take? It's hard to say. How long? The affairs of the world are hard to predict, and it's too complicated to explain. 10 years. Maybe. What if I cultivate longer and practice more every day? Then it might take 20 years. Why? It's complicated. Oh, the calico cat lay down, listening attentively. The felt blanket under his body gradually warmed up. It was already midnight, and the galaxy covered the sky above his head. Without his noticing it, the lights on the distant mountainside suddenly went out. When he looked up again, the sky had started to show a hint of dawn color, with with a touch of white tinged with yellow, yellow suffused with green, and green transitioning into blue. Songyu dozed off under the blanket. The calico cat curled up at his waist where it was the warmest. \\\\*. Morning light shone from the mountain peak opposite. The cypress trees beside him blocked the light for a while, but soon the sun rose above the branches, shining directly on his face. Songyu slowly opened his eyes and carefully sat up. Despite his caution, he couldn't evade the cat's alertness, unless she didn't want to get up. Thus, before Songyu could get out from under the blanket, a cat's head emerged first. She sleepily turned her head, squinting her eyes, looking left and right, and then fixed her gaze on Songyu. "Are we leaving?" the calico cat asked, assuming he was getting ready to leave. She then crawled out of the blanket, yawning and stretching. She sat down, waiting for him. "Almost," Songyu said as he stood up. Facing the great mountain opposite, he stretched and loosened his muscles. It was mid-spring, and the mountains were already green. Although it wasn't early morning, a band of white mist still encircled the distant mountainsides. It was light and thin, with a pale color, not densely white or glaringly bright, but looking all the more refreshing. The green mountains appeared faintly tinted with blue in the morning, making the scene clear and pristine. As for the foot of the mountain where they had gone last night, there was no sign of a main road, market, lights. There was just a desolate mountain, densely forested flat ground, and a narrow path running through the middle. Songyu smiled but said nothing. Soon they set off again. The horse's bell jingled, echoing through the layers upon layers of great mountains, clouds, and mist. Songyu walked with his bamboo staff, winding through one mountain after another. Lady Calico also transformed into her human form. Holding her small bamboo staff, she imitated Songyu, tapping the ground with every step. They didn't know how far they had walked, only that the sun gradually moved overhead, and their shadows shifted from one side to the other. It was nearly the 3rd month of the lunar year, and the sun had become increasingly scorching. Suddenly, Lady Calico ran past Songyu with a clatter, holding her bamboo staff high in her little hand. She didn't run far before deviating from the mountain path. She rushed up a dirt slope beside the road and looked ahead. Then she turned back and shouted to Songyu, "There's water ahead." "Good," Songyu thanked her and called her to come down. Round a bend, he indeed heard the sound of water. A mountain spring trickled down from the top of the right side of the mountain, forming a small waterfall, which then turned into a small stream. There was a flat area beside it, where grass grew sparsely. Previous travelers had used stones to set up several small stoves. It was unknown how old they were or how many people had used them. Thus they rested here and prepared lunch. Even though it was just a brief stop, Songyu took off the saddle bag from the horse. He patted it, thanked it for its hard work, and let it graze freely on the grass. Songyu pondered. There was still a caddy of ham slices left from last night's purchase. The mushrooms he had bought were wrapped carefully in musa basju leaves, and even the wild fruits from the mountains remained uncrushed. Since they happened to be resting here, he would stew a pot of ham and mushroom soup, which would surely be more delicious than the dry mushroom soup from the previous night. Having made up his mind, he began to prepare. After spending a long time outdoors, cooking in the mountain wilderness had become second nature. The Taoist moved quickly and efficiently, and the little girl also energetically gathered firewood and started the fire. Soon, cooking smoke was rising in the mountains. At this point, the Taoist unexpectedly found himself with nothing to do. He half laid down in the shade of a tree at the side, eating wild fruits while glancing at the little girl. "If you want to play, I can tend the fire." "I'll tend the fire." "Then just keep it on low heat. With your skills, you surely won't mess it up, right?" "I won't. You do know that they're poisonous if not fully cooked, right?" "Cats don't eat mushrooms." "What about calico cats?" "Calico cats don't eat them either. But neither the ham nor the soup should be eaten." "I won't sneak a bite." "All right." The Taoist squinted his eyes, fully enjoying the leisure of the moment while deeply contemplating the surrounding nature at that moment. A bright spring day was truly comfortable, neither cold nor hot, with the spring breeze carrying the scent of grass and wildflowers. The great mountains were quiet, with only the sound of the wind and the occasional chime from the swaying bell on the grazing horse. In the midst of his contentment, he couldn't help feeling that he was privately enjoying the spring scenery of the place at that moment. Although his stomach was empty, a little cat was helping to tend the fire and simmer the soup, so he only needed to wait. Soon he would be able to taste the delicious mushroom soup. This stolen moment of leisure, for some reason, seemed even more captivating than an ordinary half-day of rest. Gradually, the soup started to give off a rich aroma. The little girl, tending the fire, suddenly looked up and craned her neck to peer into the distance. "Someone's coming." Songyu slightly opened his eyes and followed her gaze. However, the winding path was obscured by the mountain, making it impossible to see anything. After a while, he heard the faint sound of bells, a fair number of them. Soon, the sound of the bells became gradually clearer, and a group of traveling merchants appeared at the end of the mountain path. 4 or 5 tanned adults and 2 teenage youths were leading horses and mules loaded with goods towards them. Song Yu sat up a bit straighter. This place had a clearing as well as a mountain spring. It was a resting spot for traveling merchants to begin with. Upon seeing Song Yu, the merchants were somewhat surprised and cautiously sized him up. However, they did come over to draw water for drinking. Then they sat together in a circle, taking out some dry rations to share and eat. Song Yu's mushroom soup was almost ready. He got up from under the tree and filled a bowl. He gave Lady Calico extra meat while he took mostly mushrooms and soup, eating them with a steamed bun. The traveling merchants kept glancing at Song Yu. He occasionally looked back at them. Finally, their eyes met. One of the tanned merchants smiled and nodded in greeting. Song Yu also quickly returned the smile and nodded back. The merchant then cupped his hands at him and asked, "Where are you coming from, and where are you heading?" "I come from Jianghu County, and am heading to Southern Art County in Pingzhu," Song Yu replied. "Where are you all coming from?" "We came from Southern Art County, and are heading to Jianghu County." What a coincidence. This road mainly connects Southern Art County and Jianghu, running from Pingzhu to Shuzhou. Few people walk this road now, and those who start or end their journey midway are even rarer. The merchant smiled. Most people who walk this road are merchants like us traveling between Pingzhu and Shuzhou. "I see. Have you traveled this road before?" "It's my first time," Song Yu replied. "I'm from Yizhu. I traveled to Shuzhou and wish to go to Pingzhu." "First time?" "Yes." The merchant seemed very surprised, scrutinizing Song Yu again. Then he glanced at the little girl beside him who was holding her bowl and paying no attention to other things, focused solely on eating the meat in her bowl. His brows gradually furrowed. He turned to his companions and exchanged glances with them, seemingly communicating silently. It fell silent for a moment in the mountains. Only the 2 youths were puzzled, but they also sensed that something was amiss in the atmosphere. The merchant suddenly asked, "Are you all humans or demons?" "I am human," Song Yu calmly and sincerely replied. "If you are a mountain ghost or demon and want something, just tell us. We've been traveling this road for decades and will continue for decades more. Whatever you want, we can bring it for you. Perhaps in the future, every time when we pass through here again, we might even sit down and have a cup of tea with you," said the merchant to Song Yu. "But if you intend to cause trouble, it's broad daylight and there are many of us here. We're not easily deceived or foolish enough to fall for tricks. I advise you to give up such thoughts and look for someone else." "You misunderstand. I am truly human." "How can you prove that?" "I'm telling the absolute truth. No need for proof." "Are you brave enough to swear by the Thunder God?" "This mountain has a mountain god. Why should I swear by the Thunder God?" "Which mountain god? I am not aware." "Well, which Thunder God do you want?" "How about Duke of Thunderjoe?" Song Yu smiled and casually replied, "If I am not human, may Duke of Thunderjoe strike me with lightning." The merchants exchanged glances. They knew such oaths might not have much real power, but Song Yu had a friendly appearance and spoke gently and politely. Even if he was a demon, he did not seem like the vicious kind of demon, so they felt somewhat relieved. His Taoist robe and the fact that he was traveling with a juju-bred horse, along with his calm oath, made them feel more at ease. They thought if he were truly a ghost or demon, the fact that he dared to act against the bunch of them in broad daylight and take on a human form meant that he must have considerable cultivation skills. In that case, they could only consider themselves unfortunate. It was better to be polite and avoid provoking him, and it was best to avoid conflict. "My apologies for the misunderstanding, sir. Please forgive us for any offense." "Not at all," Song Yu promptly said. "It is wise for you to be cautious while traveling through the wilderness." Despite encountering the survival tactic of these traveling merchants many times before, he still found it intriguing every time. "Sir, you are unfamiliar with these roads, and yet dare travel alone in the wilderness. You must be a master if you're not a ghost or demon. May I ask where you cultivate?" "I am not a master. I'm just a wandering Taoist priest, and I cultivate in Yizhu, Linquan County." "Why did you choose this route to Pingzhou? There are other roads." "Once I reached Jianghu County, I had no choice but to take this route. This road is known to have demons." "I am brave." "Where did you sleep last night?" "In the wilderness, with no fixed place. Any spot can serve as a resting place for me." "It seems that skilled masters like you are truly bold." "With a clear conscience, one need not fear demons and ghosts." Song Yu smiled and looked at the merchants. "Aren't you also traveling?" "Us?" The merchants, having conversed with Song Yu, no longer felt as on guard. They found he did not seem like a demon, though they didn't fully relax their vigilance. Letter 1E59, letter 1D656, Eng letter 1D428, Cyrillicia. They shook their heads and said, "We've traveled this route many times. We know where we can find lodging, which days to walk faster, and which days to take it slower to reach a town or a military outpost. Secondly, we don't have much of a choice. This road is the shortest route between Pingzhou and Shuzhou. The other route may be easier to walk, but it's much longer. Although there are no demons, spirits, ghosts, and monsters on that road, the mountain bandits and robbers aren't necessarily easier to deal with. We're just trying to make a bit of hard-earned money. We don't have that many options." Song Yu nodded. "That makes sense. Have you heard that every year people mysteriously disappear while traveling this road, or encounter ghosts on this road?" "I would like to hear more." Song Yu looked at the merchants. The pot in front of him, simmering with ham and mushroom soup, was still bubbling with steam rising. He asked, "Would you like a bowl of hot soup? It goes well with dry rations." Merchants immediately declined. Song Yu then picked up a banana leaf wrapped with wild fruits. "I also have some wild fruits picked from the mountains. Would you like to try?" The merchants declined again. Song Yu was not surprised and did not ask again. It was acceptable to have a brief conversation with a stranger walking through these mountains, whether they were human or a demon. But whether human or demon, who would dare casually eat something offered by the other? Villains used drugs, and demons used magical means. It was very common to use such methods on food and drink to sedate someone. Song Yu only asked out of courtesy. As long as he extended the offer as a formality, that was enough. Suntan merchant said, "As for those who take this road but are only seen entering the mountains and never coming out, I have no idea what happens to them. Whether they were eaten by demons or wild beasts, or if they slipped off a cliff and fell to their death. Who knows? All I know is that when my second uncle passed through here last year, he encountered countless demons and spirits." A young man next to him immediately asked, "What kind of demons and spirits? How did he encounter them?" "It was too reckless. He just can't stay idle." The merchant shook his head. He had traveled this route for decades and never encountered anything unusual, so he thought it was safe. One day, he walked slower and didn't reach his destination, so he decided to rest on the mountain for the night. In the middle of the night, he somehow felt that there were lights. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a market town with bright lights, stalls, and shops everywhere. It was bustling, and everyone carried a kind of lantern. "What kind of lanterns?" The young man's eyes widened with curiosity. "Just ordinary lanterns with no special design. But it wasn't really the lanterns, it was those holding them," said the merchant. "At first glance, they looked human, but upon closer inspection, they were not human at all." "What were they?" "Demons, ghosts, monsters, and spirits of all kinds. Mostly in human form, but think about it. Who would be out at night at the demons and spirits market?" And then, my uncle was scared witless. Later, a ghost dressed in an official uniform approached him and spoke to him, but he couldn't say a word. Later, that ghost official grabbed him by the collar and dragged him out. It wasn't until the next day when Elder Sue's group passed by and saw my second uncle by the roadside that they brought him back, said the merchant. He fell seriously ill after he returned, but has recovered now. However, he won't travel this road again, let alone walk around the village at night. Every meal with us, he recounts this story. Is it true? I don't think it's fake. This road has always been eerie. I've heard that similar incidents have happened to others in the past, said the merchant, who then paused for a moment with a neutral expression. However, not all demons and spirits are necessarily evil. Take my second uncle's encounter, for example. Although he accidentally wandered into someone else's territory, they didn't harm him or do anything to him. Instead, they even helped him find his way out. Song Yu felt as if the merchant was subtly hinting at him, and he found it both amusing and interesting. The two young men, on the other hand, widened their eyes and listened with great interest. The merchant then advised them, "So, when you take on our work in the future, remember this. Avoid traveling at night and don't sleep in the mountains. If you encounter any ghosts, you might not be so lucky." After a brief pause, he added, "If you do encounter them, remember that demons and spirits, like people, are mostly reasonable. Don't offend them or provoke them. Be respectful and courteous, and they won't harm you for no reason." There it was again, another subtle hint. Song Yu said nothing, simply drinking his soup. The two young men, however, savored the advice and nodded repeatedly. One bold young man looked at Song Yu and asked cautiously, "Have you heard similar stories, sir? Did you encounter anything last night?" "I have heard of such stories. They said that the market here opens during the late months of the 2nd, 5th, and 8th lunar months, as well as in the late winter month," Song Yu answered partially. He looked at the middle-aged merchant and said, "But you are right. When traveling through the wilderness, it is best to avoid traveling at night. If unavoidable, keep your head tightly covered and avoid wandering or looking around. Entering a demon's realm is never good for humans. If you do encounter them, remember that demons and spirits also have feelings. Don't treat them as monsters or filth as soon as you encounter them. Exactly. The middle-aged merchant's eyes flickered as he was deep in thought. Upon hearing this, he was reassured that the Taoist priest in front of him was likely not a demon. Even if he was, he must be of the kind-hearted sort. The merchant then asked, "I'm curious about the market times for these demons and spirits. How did you come to know about them?" "It's just hearsay, the truth of which I cannot vouch for," Song Yu said with a smile, shaking his head. "You might try to avoid these times in the future, and perhaps share this with other traveling merchants on this road. But don't spread it too far, lest those who are fascinated by demons and spirits especially come look for the market and end up in danger." "Understood." Song Yu tilted his head back and drank his soup. After adding ham, the soup was indeed much richer in flavor, and even the color had changed. However, it would have been even better if made with old hen as the base, then simmered with mushrooms and ham for an exquisite taste. This was the last mouthful. After finishing, Song Yu went to wash his bowl at the mountain spring. When he returned, the merchants had mostly rested enough and were ready to continue their journey. Thus, Song Yu stopped by the roadside to bid them farewell. "Then we'll head off first." "Goodbye." A group of people and pack mules passed by him. The dark-skinned merchant couldn't help but glance back at him. A Taoist priest with a young girl was indeed an unusual sight. The Taoist priest had a fair complexion without signs of sun or wind exposure, and one might say he had an ethereal presence. But the young girl was exceptionally beautiful, with skin so fair it seemed to glow, free of any signs of tanning and sunburn. There was not a speck of dust or dirt on her body or face. In these times, such cleanliness in a child was quite rare, especially in a child who is traveling in the mountains and enduring the elements. Given Pingzhu's many legends of gods and demons, and the frequent appearances of demons and spirits in these mountains, it was quite normal for the merchants to mistake them for demons at first. As for now, they were either demons or masters. But what the Taoist priest said in the end? At that moment, the merchant saw the Taoist priest turning to pack up his things, cleaning the pot and bowls before placing them in a bag. He then put the bag on the horse's back, and atop the bag hung an old-fashioned lantern. Wasn't today precisely the second half of the second lunar month? The Taoist priest turned to look at him. The merchant hesitated for a moment, quickly trying to look away but found himself inexplicably pausing. He then cupped his hands toward the Taoist priest. "What's the matter, Uncle Yang?" "Nothing." "Why did you cup your hands to him again?" "Let's go." The merchant shook his head, still feeling that this young Taoist priest was either a demon or a master. However, whether demons and spirits or masters, if they possessed both cultivation skills as well as character and sincerely helped others, they could all be regarded as immortals. "How interesting." Song Yu shook his head, finding it all rather intriguing. After tidying up, he set off again. In high spirits, his steps were lighter, though not faster. Time seemed to pass more quickly, and the plants, trees, mountains, and clouds by the roadside looked much more pleasant. The little girl walked ahead, holding her small bamboo staff. She was not using it as a walking aid, but swinging it around, tapping at the grass by the road. Occasionally, she would jump up to swat at butterflies whenever she encountered one. Song Yu watched her, amused. He couldn't help but wonder, how dull would this journey have been without her? "Are you sleepy, Lady Calico?" "I'm not sleepy." "Are you exhausted?" "Not at all." "Is it fun?" "Very fun." The little girl, without looking back, strode ahead in large steps while swinging the bamboo staff in her hand. Her voice sounded, "If only I had a knife, it would be even more fun." Oh, it finally dawned on Song Yu that she had learned from that female knight. By mid-afternoon, the little girl finally grew tired. Rubbing her eyes, she turned to Song Yu, asking if she could take a nap on the back of the horse. Of course, she could. She then transformed into a cat and returned to the cloth bag on the horse's back to sleep. The journey became considerably less entertaining. While traveling from the mountainside to the summit, then down to the foot of the mountain, they passed by the ruins of an old village from the previous dynasty and encountered many abandoned pavilions. In some places, remnants of old earthen walls could still be faintly discerned. Most of the originally carved stone boundary markers remained in place, though half of them were now buried under weeds. The sun began to dip further west. As they reached the halfway point of another mountain, a pavilion appeared ahead. The scenery here was quite pleasant. On one side was a mountain, and on the other, a cliff. The roadside was dotted with bushes in bloom with flowers of various colors, creating a patchwork of beauty. The dirt path wove through the flowers and grasses, curling around the mountain. At the edge of the mountain, it seemed to end abruptly halfway up the mountain, with the blue sky stretching out beyond. The pavilion stood at the end of the visible path. Beside it was a pine tree, growing on the mountain and leaning over the path and cliff as if to greet travelers. Initially, Xianxia thought it was another abandoned pavilion and wondered why it was placed here. But upon closer inspection, he realized that this was not an abandoned pavilion at all. The green-tiled roof gleamed in the light, and the pavilion's columns were a vivid red, as if recently painted. It was clearly a new pavilion. As he drew closer, changing his angle of view to avoid the obstruction of the pine branches and pavilion columns, he saw a person sitting inside the pavilion. The individual was tall, dressed in a neatly arranged robe, and was even drinking tea. The sound of hoofbeats grew nearer to the pavilion. The person in the pavilion turned and smiled at Xianxia, as if waiting for him and extending an invitation. Xianxia pondered for a moment, then walked over with a smile. Inside the pavilion, there was a stone table with a complete set of tea utensils, including 2 teacups, one in front of the person and one on the other side of the table. The person inside the pavilion appeared middle-aged, with a somewhat square face. He had thick eyebrows and rough skin, but he was dressed in fine clothing. He looked like a distinguished scholar or gentleman. As Xianxia entered the pavilion, the man stood up. Xianxia also stopped in his tracks. One of them stood in front of the stone table, while the other had just arrived at the pavilion's entrance, and they greeted each other with a bow. "Greetings. Greetings. Please take a seat." "Very well." The two sat down across from each other at the stone table, and the middle-aged man made a gesture inviting Xianxia to drink tea. "Please, have some tea." Xianxia picked up the teacup. First, he examined it. The tea was a pale green and looked quite nice. He then sniffed it, noting the strong aroma and good quality of the leaves. After a brief pause and a sip, however, he found it somewhat bitter and not very smooth. The man smiled at him. "You're quite bold." "It's just a cup of tea," Xianxia replied. "How is the tea?" the man asked. "Average," Xianxia said, setting the cup down and not wanting to drink it anymore. He then looked at the man and inquired, "Why did you specifically wait here for me, mountain god?" "I once met your master's master, an old acquaintance of sorts. Since his heir has arrived here, it's only natural for me to come and meet you," the mountain god explained. "The mountain roads are rugged, so I set up a pavilion by the roadside to offer you some tea for you to sit and rest, as well as have a quick chat." "Why didn't you come to meet me last night?" "Last night, you were quite absorbed in your conversation with the wild ghosts from the Pigtail Peaks. If I had appeared then and met you, wouldn't it have disturbed this pure encounter?" "Thank you for your consideration." Xiangxia's gratitude was genuine. The mountain god's pure kind gesture and thoughtfulness, in respecting his meeting with the small ghost, was indeed worth thanking. But after a pause, he asked curiously, "But I noticed you were present when I encountered the evil creatures in the mountains last night. Why didn't you come out to meet me then?" At these words, the mountain god paused his action of lifting the teacup. "You knew I was present." "Not only did I know you were there, but I also know those gathering evil creatures were probably summoned by you. Otherwise, how could I attract so many evil creatures just by passing through the mountains? It's unlikely that all the evil creatures in the mountains had gathered there to convene a meeting," Xianxia said with a smile, then turned to look at the mountain god. "Although I've heard from those in the market town that you have a bad temper, you've set up this market to provide convenience and protection for the mountain spirits and demons, granting them light and driving away evil spirits on the mountain paths. You must be a benevolent and compassionate mountain god. Why would you make these evil creatures trouble me? Does it have anything to do with my senior from Hidden Dragon Temple?" The mountain god said, "You're quite perceptive. But that happened at least 100 years ago. I haven't met or known that senior. Why should you trouble me because of that?" Xianxia asked. "I'm not so petty." "Then perhaps you were here to deliver alchemical materials. If so, I may have misunderstood your intentions." "Not quite." "Oh. Your senior, though immensely powerful, did not cultivate longevity arts. He's probably long gone," the mountain god said. He took a sip of tea and set the cup down after a moment of hesitation, apparently finding it not to his taste. "Besides, I actually hold no grudge against him. Last night, I merely wanted to see how skilled the heir of Hidden Dragon Temple was and how well you could uphold the legacy of that great man back then." "I see," Xianxia said with a smile, though he kept his thoughts private. "So, what do you think?" "You know best yourself. There's no need for further questions. It's always interesting to hear such things from others." "Haha, how amusing." The mountain god's face broke into a smile. "You're more eloquent than your master's master." "I'm not sure which master's master you're referring to." It's been too long, and you haven't met him, so there's no point for you to know who he is. The mountain god shook his head. However, there's one thing about you that surprised me, but I only discovered it today. Do tell. You're not modest. It's quite nice to hear about myself from others' perspective. Last night, I saw you eliminate the evil creatures from the mountain with a snap of your fingers. Although your mastery of the fire element spell was indeed extraordinary, it was evident that your understanding of the 5 elements method was also quite remarkable. However, that alone would barely be worthy of the hidden dragon temple's legacy. The mountain god paused. But I didn't expect that, despite your young age, you have not only achieved such a level in the 5 elements method and spells, but also were quite accomplished in other areas. I have indeed studied many things. Xianxia paused, but I'm a bit confused about the other areas you mentioned. Young people shouldn't be so modest, the mountain god said, and waved his sleeves. The fact that you could detect my presence last night clearly indicates that your skills go beyond mere mastery of the 5 elements method and spells. Is that so? Xianxia quickly put on a smile and bowed. It's truly remarkable that you can carve out such an area within these great mountains, rooted in the mortal realm yet distant from it. With your divine abilities, and within the mountains where you were born, how could I possibly have the means to see through you? Huh, what do you mean? I just asked a casual question. You're the one who admitted it, Xianxia said with a smile, glancing at the tea on the table. Human affairs may be more complex than you think. Why are you silent? How dare you insult me? Is it not you who were rude first? The mountain god fell silent and exchanged glances with the Taoist priest. The pavilion fell into silence. Even the mountain wind stopped, the trees ceased their rustling, and the birds fell silent. The entire mountain seemed to plunge into a dreadful quiet. However, Xianxia remained composed as ever, seemingly ignorant of all these. After a moment, the wind returned and rustled the leaves, and the pine tree that peeked out by the pavilion resumed its slow swaying. But the birds were still timid and dared not chirp. The mountain god lowered his head and took a sip of tea before speaking. You're indeed worthy of being the heir of Hidden Dragon Temple. Have I brought shame upon my master's master? However, I've never heard of any Hidden Dragon Temple heir who gained fame through clever tricks. Is this tea good? I've heard that the 5 elements method and spells complement each other well. It's a pity that while your master's master cultivated 5 element spells, he focused on the heaven and earth method. It has always been my regret that I have not had the chance to see the full splendor of the strongest human cultivator mastering the 5 elements method and spells. That is truly regretful. Xianxia shook his head. My master cultivated only the 5 elements method, but he spent the first half of his life studying 5 elements spells. Unfortunately, he never passed through here during his travels and didn't meet you, so you couldn't fulfill your wish. But I met you, so it's the same. You seem to misunderstand. I didn't cultivate the 5 elements method, and my mastery of 5 elements spells is not high. Only my fire element spell is relatively good, as demonstrated to you last night. The mountain god suddenly frowned, staring intently at him. That's a lie, Xianxia, relaxed and smiling, said. What I cultivated was the 4 seasons rotation method. I purposely said that to you merely because I was upset and wanted to make things a bit uncomfortable for you. With that, he felt an immense sense of relief all over. The 5 elements method was indeed powerful, but its application was not as versatile as the 4 seasons rotation method. Cultivators of the 5 elements method, no matter how deep their cultivation, would struggle to detect the mountain god last night. However, someone cultivating the 4 seasons rotation method with a diverse range of studies might have a chance. Xianxia had indeed felt someone watching him last night and guessed it might have been the mountain god, and that these evil creatures were related to him. But at the time, he had considered many factors. Firstly, from the little ghost's words, it was clear that the mountain god was benevolent and kind. Secondly, while there were many evil creatures in the mountains, they didn't pose a threat to the hidden dragon temple's heir. It was just like throwing a large rock in the road to see how one would get past it. Thirdly, the recent acquaintance with the little ghost was rare and precious, and revealing the mountain god might have disturbed this pure encounter. Fourthly, it was only a guess at that time and not a certainty. Ultimately, his inherent laziness had prevailed. He knew that the mountain god was benevolent and had a connection with his master's master, and the mountain god was trying to test him. He had the little ghost as an excuse, and his mood was quite good at the time. His inherent laziness took effect, so he decided to leave directly. He hadn't expected the mountain god to be waiting by the roadside today. At the very least, he had to give him a piece of his mind for the sake of inner satisfaction. The mountain god's expression gradually darkened. it seemed as if he was increasingly uncomfortable, feeling a greater insult than before. His pretense of suave demeanor began to fade, replaced by visible anger. Rumble, the great mountain suddenly started to shake. HMPH, his voice changed, becoming as deep as the mountain itself, seeming to come from in front and from all directions. Indeed, the mountain god had a bad temper. From afar, big rocks tumbled down from the mountain peak, carving a startling trail through the dense forest amidst the thunderous rumbling. On the mountainside, soil flowed downhill, and the road was severed. This kind of spirit, naturally born from the great mountains, was truly incomparable to the mountain god appointed by the imperial court or the heavenly palace. It embodied the very essence of these mountains, possessing an unparalleled power here. One could only imagine the grandeur of a massive mountain, its base hidden beneath the clouds, its midsection shrouded within them, and its peak towering above, trembling in the distance. An earthquake would be nothing in comparison, and similar mountains spanned hundreds of li. When the mountain god was enraged, a great catastrophe would befall. The horses outside the pavilion were immediately startled, and the Calico cat was also startled awake, poking its head out of the cloth pouch. She extended her claws and dug deeply into the fabric as she tried to steady herself amidst her trembling and fear. Then she quickly jumped out and looked around for Xianxia. Mountain god, please calm down. This mountain belongs to you. What benefit is there in creating chaos and causing harm to the living? The mountain road has been here for years. It's a pity to destroy it, the Taoist priest spoke calmly. If you wish to test the air of the hidden dragon temple further, you might choose a gentler approach. With that, the mountain's trembling ceased. However, large rocks continued to fall from the mountain peak. These immense rocks were gigantic, and they quickly assembled into a giant towering 100 feet jianghu, comparable to a mountain. Rumble. Then I shall test the abilities of the hidden dragon temple heir of the current generation. The mountain god seemed to be sitting right in front of him while sipping tea, or perhaps he was now atop the giant rock, speaking in a voice that seemed to come from all around. How will you handle this? The rock giant took one step after another toward the pavilion. Each step caused the earth to shake and rumble. The stones falling from the giant's body were likely the size of the pavilion itself, and its feet and fists were many times larger than the pavilion. One could only wonder who could withstand a stomp or a punch from such a being. Yet it did not rush to crush the mountain pavilion, but approached slowly, as if waiting to see how the Taoist priest would cope. The mountain god's gaze was fixed on the Taoist priest. The Taoist priest responded unhurriedly, Mountain god, you're the spirit of the great mountain, and this incarnation has the weight of a mountain and the strength of 10,000 jun. Such power is beyond human capacity to stop. However, I have previously traveled the world and experienced jianghu, and I have gained some insights. Few cultivators practice the 4 seasons rotation method, so I believe this thread of spiritual energy from jianghu might be of some interest to you. As he spoke, spiritual energy manifested in his hand. This spiritual energy was a mix of white and blue as well as purple, resembling a streak of lightning on a rainy night. He then pointed forward and used the strongest jianghu spiritual energy he had obtained since he started cultivating to activate his thunder technique. Suddenly, a thunderbolt struck, with lightning exploding in the clear sky. Boom! The thunderbolt was so bright that it was blinding even in daylight. Though it lacked the true power of 10,000 jun, it was a grand celestial might that directly struck the giant's head. What Xianxia said was true. The giant was as large as a mountain, and mere human strength could not resist it. Water could not wash it away, nor could fire burn it. However, the mountain god was indeed a spirit of the mountain, and the giant was his incarnation. Spirits, whether living or malevolent, feared celestial might. Both jianghu's spiritual energy and thunder were precisely effective against them. They combined, and the thunderbolt struck the giant, seemingly causing no damage. Yet the giant instantly disintegrated, crushing half the mountain. Cough, cough. Even the mountain god in the pavilion could not help but cough. Then he waved his hand, causing the giant rocks to tremble again. Rumble. At that moment, a cat rushed into the pavilion in a panic. Taoist priest, hurry up and run. As soon as the Calico cat spoke, it looked up and saw a stranger. It froze for a moment, instinctively moving closer to Xianxia, staring up at the mountain god in silence. The pavilion suddenly fell silent. The mountain also quieted down, and the giant rocks ceased their movement. The mountain god and the Taoist priest both turned their attention to the cat. Taoist priest, the Calico cat was uneasy. In the next moment, however, the two of them took up their cups and resumed drinking tea as if nothing had happened. The Calico cat was stunned by the sight. The mountain god set down his teacup, his face slightly pale. You indeed deserve your reputation, heir of hidden dragon temple. Apologies. I have old ties with your master's master, so I will stop my testing here. Do you really have ties with my master's master? Song Yu also set down his teacup. I have only heard that you once had some sparring sessions with my master's master. Indeed, we fought, but having ties and sparring are not mutually exclusive. Since that is the case, I also got to know you in the same manner today. Song Yu glanced at the cat beside him. I did not come alone, so please add another cup of tea. The mountain god waved his hand, and an empty cup appeared on the table. Water flowed from the air, filling the cup with tea. Lady Calico, please have some tea, Song Yu said to the Calico cat. The Calico cat, with uncertain eyes, glanced between Song Yu and the mountain god. Feeling that the person was not easy to deal with, she hesitated before jumping onto the stone table. She leaned close to the teacup and dipped its tongue in for a taste. Tui, it was bitter and astringent. The Calico cat squinted, shaking its head, and quickly retreated. The mountain god remained silent, turning his gaze away from the cat and looking at Song Yu. It seems I underestimated you earlier. I'm merely somewhat talented. Still being modest. You flatter me, but mortals are ultimately mortals, and so are cultivators. Even with the favor of the heavens and great talent, mortals only live for 100 years or so. Song Yu shook his head. My master's master was also a prodigy of his time. Yet now, while you still sit here drinking tea, he has turned into a mound of yellow earth. Eternal life is increasingly hard to obtain. Yes, so those with eternal life like you are truly remarkable. Compared to your evergreen presence, we are but fleeting flowers. There are no eternal things. Does that mean you also can't live forever? Speaking of it, my consciousness has only existed for a little over 1,000 years. If one day I grow tired, I might just fall asleep. Or perhaps the gods of the heavenly palace might get annoyed with me one day and decide to take me away. I thought the mountain god would be more enduring than the mountains and rivers. I am the mountain, yet not quite. Song Yu fell silent. The atmosphere had unconsciously eased a bit. Song Yu rarely encountered such a remarkable being, and the mountain god rarely met someone who was qualified to converse with him. With the mountain god's previous ties with Song Yu's master's master, neither seemed to mind the earlier minor clash. They sat in the pavilion, enjoying the breeze, discussing various topics. They chatted about everything, from the heavens and the earth to the heavenly Tao, from the current dynasty to the previous one, from the mountain god's acquaintance with the Grandmaster to the first Grandmaster of the Hidden Dragon Temple, whom neither of them had met. They discussed topics ranging from the 5 elements methods to the 4 seasons rotation method, and from the mountain god to the method of becoming a god through incense offerings that was gaining popularity, the heavenly palace, and the Buddhist kingdoms. The entire conversation was relaxed and casual, free from any mundane or trivial matters. Anyone witnessing this would find it hard to imagine that these two had just caused the earth and mountain to shake with their conflict. Cultivators were like that. The mountain wind blew from nowhere, brushing past the outstretched pine branches. It was hard to tell whether it filled the pavilion or just passed through. Regardless, it did not cease. The sun was also setting further west. The mountain god glanced at the horizon. It's getting late. The sun has not yet set. You don't know that a few li ahead, and to the right up the mountain, there is a grove of lily magnolias in full bloom. I came here and waited for you to remind you to go see them. The mountain god paused. He added, that magnolia tree was the first one planted by your master's master back in the day. Over time, more trees grew over the whole mountain, and now the entire mountain is covered in the same color when it blooms. These days, it's at its peak. Today is the best time to enjoy the lily magnolias. If you hurry, you can still catch it. Is that so? Song Yu had no intention of staying any longer, quickly rising and saying respectfully, then I must bid you farewell. Thank you for the tea, the conversation, and the reminder. As for the earlier words of offense, I apologize. Please overlook them and forget them completely. I enjoyed conversing with you. No need to say more. The mountain god shook his head, saying to the Taoist priest, after all, I was the one who was rude first. Even so, last night you refrained from disturbing my meeting with that ghost. Today, you set up a pavilion, personally making a good cup of tea for me to rest and quench my thirst. Both gestures of goodwill are genuine. My earlier words of offense were somewhat inappropriate. Song Yu lowered his head and looked at the tea on the table, smiling. Speaking of which, pardon me for being rude again. It's just that you're a spirit nurtured by heaven and earth, pure and pristine. In this great mountain, you possess boundless power. Even the gods of the heavenly palace likely pale in comparison to your strength. By all rights, you should not be constrained by anything. So why force yourself to learn the complexities of human behavior? Wouldn't it be just as good to connect heart to heart in this way? Mountain god furrowed his brow but remained silent. Songyu smiled and cupped his hand again. Decades or centuries later, when descendants of Hidden Dragon Temple pass through here, you should make it a bit more challenging if you wish to test them again. With that, he smiled and stepped out of the pavilion. The mountain wind swirled, and the mountain mist flowed. The pines and cypresses on the nearby mountains seemed to be waving gently. Looking back, the pavilion had disappeared silently. The welcoming pine with its poetic essence was gone. The mountain slopes and paths previously damaged by the enraged mountain god had miraculously returned to their original state. Everything seemed like a dream. "Let's go," Songyu said to the Calico cat, leading the way further. Taoist priest. Him? Who was that? The mountain god. It's the mountain god. Songyu said, "Yes, but not an ordinary mountain god. He's a spirit born from this great mountain, a spiritual resonance of the mountains." "Is he powerful or not?" "Very powerful." "And the water?" "What water?" "The water in the cup." "That's tea." "Is it poisonous?" "No." The cat grimaced. "It tastes bad." "Indeed." The large and small figures of Songyu and the cat gradually walked away, with the horse obediently following behind them. Despite being terrified by the recent upheaval, it had not run off on its own. A few li ahead, a giant rock blocked the path, yet a small path appeared beside it. Upon seeing this, Songyu realized what it meant and turned right, then ascended the mountain, following the new path that appeared out of nowhere. Halfway up the mountain, he saw the entire hillside covered in lily magnolias. Lily magnolias were also known as mullein magnolias, woody orchids, or purple magnolias. Despite the name purple magnolia, they were pink. The most prominent feature of lily magnolias was their intense pink, even more vivid than most pink flowers. When blooming, the leaves hadn't yet fully grown, and the branches were covered in flowers, turning the entire tree into a pink mass. At a glance, it seems to be a color artificially mixed, giving a dreamy and almost unreal appearance. If the entire mountain were covered with such flowers, when the sunlight shone on them, each tree's pink blossoms would vary in shade, darker ones leaning toward red, lighter ones toward white. This entire scene on the mountain could only be described as dreamlike. Yet, these blossoms were all naturally grown in the human world. Songyu gazed up at this sight for a long time before retracting his gaze and continuing up the mountain along the small path, entering the grove. At this moment, the flowers were now overhead. Lily magnolias were not herbaceous or shrubs, but on tall trees. Despite the dense forest, the flowers were out of reach. Even the lower half of the trees had no extra branches, leaving people to walk through the bare tree trunks. Yet, if you looked up, the pink blossoms filled the blue sky. The entire mountain was flooded by a sea of pink. "Taoist priest, where is this?" "I don't know." "Where are we going?" "I don't know." "Are we staying here today?" "Maybe." A winding path meandered through the grassy forest. Songyu walked casually with no particular destination, simply strolling in the mountain and admiring the flowers over his head. It was hard to imagine that this breathtakingly gorgeous spring scene originated from a single lily magnolia planted by his master's master many years ago. Some seemingly ordinary things could turn out to be extraordinarily beautiful upon reflection. What was even more wonderful was that, upon pondering this, walking through the flowers again made him feel as if he was having a fleeting encounter with his master's master from a century ago. "Thank you, mountain god. Thank you, grandmaster." It was a pity that such beauty was fleeting. This flower only bloomed for a few days each year. Each additional moment spent here, the dusk wind continuously stripped away its petals, causing them to fall like a pink rain when the wind was strong. We wished to advise the east wind to take its time. The first light of dawn emerged from the edge of the sky, cutting through the thin mountain mist. It began to descend from the mountain peak, gradually spreading across the entire mountaintop. Thus, the lily magnolias covering the mountain were bathed in the morning light, making their pink and white hues particularly vivid and pristine. Along with the spring flowers, bathing in the morning light was a swallow. A blackened white swallow, though not entirely black but a bluish black with a metallic sheen under the sunlight, flew freely through the sky. It darted up and down, left and right. From a high vantage point, the morning mist in the mountains became a collection of wisps. In this view, the lily magnolias were partially obscured by the mist, appearing both magnificent and ethereal. Each tree looked like a blossom, and together they formed a blanket of color, covering the mountain peak. This was a beauty, beyond the grasp of ordinary mortals' eyes. Whoosh! The swallow flew through a patch of mountain mist. The scene before it quickly shifted from a blur to clarity. It then folded its wings and dived headfirst into the sea of pink flowers. Navigating over the treetops and through the branches, the swallow moved skillfully as if gliding through a world of flowers, its view entirely filled with the pink blossoms. The flowers appeared larger to the swallow than to a human, with each bloom nearly as big as itself, creating a unique sense of beauty. As it brushed past the flowers, it could clearly see their texture and patterns, and the faint ginger floral fragrance lingered at its nose. Occasionally, it collided with flowers, but continued to weave through them. This was an experience humans could not comprehend. It continued until it encountered a Taoist priest. The Taoist priest sat cross-legged amidst the lily magnolia grove, with a wool blanket spread beneath him and a bag placed nearby. A jianghu-bred horse grazed on the grass under the tree, appearing as a massive entity to the swallow. A calico cat sat beside the Taoist priest, licking and grooming its paws, when it suddenly became aware and stared up at the swallow. The night's mountain wind had scattered countless petals, and the flowers continued to fall. The petals had settled on the Taoist priest, the wool blanket, and even the bag. The jianghu-bred horse, despite being constantly in motion, also had a few pinkish-white petals stuck on it. The calico cat, however, was clean. Perhaps because it was too small, petals did not settle on it. However, a petal drifted down and coincidentally landed on its head. The calico cat immediately stopped, showing a look of confusion. It then tilted its head back to see what was touching its head, which only caused the petal to slip off. When it raised its paw to touch its head, it found nothing and became even more puzzled. It began spinning in circles and rolling on the blanket, ignoring the swallow. The swallow folded its wings and darted toward the Taoist priest like an arrow. Puff! The swallow disappeared in an instant. The Taoist priest then opened his eyes. Looking down, he saw petals scattered across his shoulders and legs. In fact, this was relatively few compared to when he had just woken up. The wool blanket was covered with petals. He randomly picked up a petal, examined it closely, and compared it with what the swallow saw from its perspective. The cat said, "Taoist priest. Did you just touch me? You can think of it that way. Why did you touch me?" "I didn't." "Then who did?" Xianxia stood up from the blanket, shaking off the petals from his body. "We should be leaving soon." "Oh." The calico cat moved away from the blanket, stepping onto the flower-strewn grass and looked down and then up. When the Taoist priest had shaken off the petals from the blanket, folded it, then placed it on the horse's back and started walking away, she followed with small, cautious steps. Arsadil Alpha. Still, it was one person, one horse, and one cat. They were still on the small, winding path through the flower-covered mountain, moving slowly down the mountain and enjoying the morning sun. "Who touched me?" The calico cat persisted with its question. \\\\. They journeyed for another day. At dusk, they had crossed the last mountain along the ancient path through the desolate hills, and they were now in the region of southern Art County. Xianxia had not yet seen farmland or villages, but had already heard faint, resounding singing, both male and female voices harmonizing. As they got closer, the singing became clearer. Another spring in March. The Taoist priest stopped on the mountainside and looked into the distance. The landscape still featured layer upon layer of mountains and rivers, all shrouded in the evening mist. However, patches of farmland could now be seen in the valleys. Occasionally, fields of golden yellow could be seen, as the cauliflower plants here bloomed unusually late. The singing echoed through the mountains, with the female voice clear and the male voice deep, coming from an unknown direction. This all indicated that he had emerged from the desolate mountain path and re-entered the human world. It's already March, Xianxia reflected, continuing forward. The horse and cat followed him. The wind filled the mountain, making Xianxia's clothes flutter and bringing a refreshing coolness. The sky was filled with gray clouds, with a large expanse of darkness. It seemed as though this stretch of land ahead had no intention of welcoming them warmly. Descending the mountain, they joined the main road. They encountered pedestrians along the roadside, some carrying milkmaid's yoke, others riding oxen or donkeys, or walking on foot. They were all aware of the approaching rain, and thus moving hurriedly. "Could you tell me the way to southern Art County?" "Just follow this road." "How far is it?" "About 10 li. "Thank you. It's going to rain soon." The passerby's voice grew fainter as Xianxia continued forward. Half an hour later, the rain had started to fall. The rain of late spring seemed to carry a hint of summer's intensity. It came down heavily and abruptly, drenching the roads in an instant and splashing mud on the floor everywhere. Xianxia put on a raincoat and a bamboo hat and placed the calico cat into the bag. The world around him was veiled in misty rain, and the path ahead twisted and turned. The light of day was dimming gradually. It seemed unlikely they would make it to the city. Song Yu had initially planned to find a pavilion to shelter from the rain, but he didn't see one. Instead, using the remaining daylight, he spotted a small temple. The temple was situated on a small hill by the roadside. The hill was not high, only about 10 jiang. The temple was modest, with just a few small rooms. Perfect! Without further thought, Song Yu stepped up the hill as the horse followed behind him. Song Yu quickly ascended the small hill. Out of habit, he looked up and noticed that there was no plaque or Chinese couplets on the sides. Nevertheless, he knocked on the door. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of the rain was so loud that he worried the occupant might not hear him. He knocked a few more times and waited. Eventually, hurried footsteps and the sound of splashing water could be heard from inside. Creak, the door opened a crack. To Song Yu's surprise, a bhikkhuni stood inside. A bhikkhuni was a Buddhist nun. She appeared to be in her 30s, with slightly yellowish skin, perhaps not yet 30. She wasn't holding an umbrella, and in the short distance from the door to the eaves, her pale blue nun's robe was already soaked by the rain. The eaves provided some shelter from the rain. She stood there, looking up and down at Song Yu before asking, "Who are you looking for?" Song Yu was momentarily stunned and then showed an apologetic expression. "I didn't know this was a nunnery. I apologize for the intrusion. I'll leave now." He gave a respectful bow as an apology and turned to leave. Buddhist temples were usually quite accommodating and easygoing in providing lodging, but a nunnery was clearly not suitable for a male guest to stay. Moreover, with the sky darkening and the heavy rain outside, there were no pedestrians on the road. Even him standing at the door and exchanging a few words might alarm or distress the nuns, let alone staying the night. So Song Yu didn't ask further and was about to leave. However, at this moment, he heard the nun's voice call out from behind, "Who are you looking for?" Song Yu had just turned and taken a step when he heard her and turned back, responding politely, "I'm not looking for anyone. I'm from the mountains of Linquin County in Yizhu, just passing through. Encountering this sudden downpour, I found no place to shelter along the way. I saw a temple by the road and took the liberty to seek shelter. I didn't expect it to be a nunnery. I apologize for disturbing the nuns." "You're not here to find someone." "No." The nun stood at the door, examining him from head to toe. Just then, the bag on the horse's back began to wiggle. The Calico cat, curious about the voices outside, tried to squeeze its head out. Despite the growing darkness, the nun could clearly see that it was a cat, its eyes particularly bright. Once its head emerged, it stared intently at her. The rain continued unabated, drumming on her head and soaking her hair. Occasionally, raindrops fell directly into her eyes or streamed down from her head to them, forcing her to blink continuously. But the cat refused to retreat. "What is that?" "That's my companion, a cat." "Where are you from?" "I came from Yizhu, then I traveled through Shuzhou and reached here. Originally planned to stop and rest in southern Art County, but was unfortunately caught in a heavy rainstorm." "Are you a Taoist priest?" "I have been cultivating in a Taoist priest temple since childhood." "Do you wish to stay to avoid the rain?" "Yes, that's why I came." The nun paused thoughtfully before stepping aside. "Then come in." "That's not appropriate, is it?" "As long as you're not a bad person." "I assure you I'm not a bad person," Song Yu said with a polite smile. "However, as a man, it's indeed inappropriate for me to stay here. I wouldn't want to cause trouble, but since I've met you, may I ask how long it takes to get to the city from here? And what time does the city close?" "It's fine, the rain is heavy. Don't get drenched," the nun said, her voice softening as she perceived his gentle demeanor. "It's still about 10 li to the city, and it's likely you won't be able to get in now. Are there other places to take shelter around here?" "Come in. There's a room available, and with this heavy rain, no one else is likely to come." Song Yu found it somewhat strange but didn't dwell on it. After a brief contemplation, he bowed respectfully and said, "Then I will come in for a short while. If the rain lessens, I will leave immediately." The nun acknowledged with a nod and said no more. Then, Song Yu led the horse inside. The nun closed the gate and pointed to a shed in the corner. "You can tie the horse there. The rain won't stop tonight, so you'll need to stay for the night. Leave first thing in the morning." Song Yu intended to refuse again, but he heard a man's voice faintly in the heavy rain. The rain was pouring heavily in the courtyard. The nun, trying to avoid the rain, quickly lifted her pants and ran toward the shed. Seeing this, Song Yu followed suit. "Why isn't your horse tied up?" "It's well behaved, so it doesn't need a rein." "How will you tie it then?" "No need to tie it. It will stay here and won't wander off." "Really?" "It's true. I wouldn't dare lie." The nun fell silent. Song Yu removed the bag from the horse's back, while the horse stood obediently without moving. The nun watched with a furrowed brow, still worried that the horse might wander off during the night. I'm Songyu, and my style name is Minglai. May I ask for your name, master? Don't ask. All right. The nun led him to a small room. Songyu had initially only intended to burn incense in the main hall to shelter from the rain, but now he didn't insist. He thanked her respectfully and carried the bag into the room. The rain was so heavy that the bag, though water-resistant, had become soaked, and its contents were wet. Songyu took them out to dry, planning to clean them up briefly. Then he would wash and air them out once he reached the city the next day. However, while organizing, he heard faint moans coming from the adjacent room amidst the sound of the rain. Indeed, many nunneries didn't even allow men to enter for incense burning, so it was unusual for a nunnery to willingly invite and accommodate a male guest overnight. And a small nunnery like this wouldn't have a special shed for tying up donkeys and horses. This was a nunnery, but not quite.